Hi, this is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to bring up a topic to NESARA or not to NESARA. And we're going to get into this hopium conversation. Coming right up. So, excuse me, allergies are super bad right now in the Oklahoma area with this too. All right. When we think about NESARA and we think about what is out there, one of the things that I see probably most often is I just can't come all the way toward that. Or someone's heard only partial information, or something that prevents them to move forward in these conversations. It's because there seems like a level of what we call hopium out there. Now, if you use it around me, you'll know I hate that word. What hopium is, I would say hopium actually is like dispensing that as a drug to prop up the masses. And what hopium is, or hope is in the Greek, it means expectation. And one of the things that I don't ever want to do with you is to raise, raise your expectations. If I'm raising your expectations, then I'm not setting them correctly. Okay, we need to set your faith. It's faith is the substance of things hoped for and the promise of things unseen. So you have faith in something that is going to occur. For instance, if you went to college and you worked on your 4-year degree to be a X, something significant, not crazy, studies that you see nowadays, but a real study. For instance, engineering, and you wanted to become an engineer. Well, you're operating in faith. You're not operating in your hope. You're operating in your faith. And that is the interesting part that most people are fully not seeing here in our movement. So let's go backward in time and think about the landscape that was happening before the 2020 election. And it was when I was becoming out there, for people to really see. And in that time frame, we had a big argument on different topics. I would talk about how Biden actually had stage 2 dementia. Now, when I was in college, there were only 4 stages of dementia. Now there's 6-ish. Stage 1 is when you have a flat affect like that. I mean, that kind of thing. I mean, and we're talking about with emotional issues. So, for instance, someone should give an emotional response, but they don't have an emotional response. And it normally comes from someone who really used to have some emotionality in how they would respond to different things, right? And you note that. And then it moves into a lots of confusion, word salad issues. And when you move into the second phase, I mean, there's more to the story, but basically that's what you notice. They can't track with conversations, or they get things all jumbled up, but they're able to kind of function. But you notice that we're losing things everywhere. We're dropping off sentences. We're dropping off understandings and information with it too. And so the ability to kind of move forward is there. And then I said, listen, Biden is doing this. And I remember very clearly people on all sides of the aisle were having a hissy fit when I would say this, because they're like, no, he's not. No, he's not. And I was like, it's classic. I see patients like this all the time in my practice. And Then, as we get to November, we have the election and its horrid results, and we see what they were trying to do, what the cabal is trying to accomplish, and then the fight that ensues. And I remember writing letters to congressmen and senators who would not vouch for Trump in every other way from a constitutional basis. And I remember having conversations about, Biden, that he actually, knowing what I know about having a top secret clearance, I said, this guy is completely, how do I say this? He would not be allowed to have sensitive information in any secret company whatsoever if he was in the private sector. But because he's in the public sector, specifically government, we let these kind of people have this all the time, and which is a major problem. And I was kind of bringing that up. And as soon as the January 6th to the January 20th inauguration comes out, what happened is I started to see these people fall away. And I remember it very clearly. Now, there was a purge on Twitter specifically, and I made it through that purge, but yet I had drops. It actually went for over and over again that I would have. I was up to 14,000. I would go down to 10, go up to 15, go down to 9, go up to 13, and they would just keep taking followers away. And I didn't understand it until I would talk to people, and they would say, "Well, yeah, I would follow you and then get followed," and I didn't do it. And so there was a real purging, excuse me, of what was happening out there, of voices. And so they tried to push you into that depression. So as we moved into a time frame of 2020, these patriots, they were strong in their viewpoint, had lost their election points, they had watched the court systems fail them, they had watched all of the arguments fail, they had seen people be arrested for their views in the DC area, and they were struggling. And so to reframe themselves, because there was it's like a frequency out of balance. See, as a musician and as an audiologist, frequency is pitch. Okay, so when we think of a sine wave and how a frequency might come out, if we're talking about pure sine waves, what happens with frequency when it becomes the wrong frequency, it can be in controversion of the correct frequency. For instance, if my guitar, I have a 1984 Ovation. It's a gorgeous guitar. Some kid was like, "I'll buy it from you." I'm like, "No, you're not buying it. I don't care what you ask from me. Okay? Give me every dime you ever had, and you'll never be able to buy it from me." But when my Ovation is out of tune, I know it because I have almost near perfect pitch. And it really makes me crazy when that kind of thing happens. Now, what some people do is they don't have what's called difference limens, Limens. And so they can't hear those pitches being out. And so someone could sing, someone could play, and their instrument or their voice is out of tune, and they go, "It sounds fine to me." And yet someone who has near perfect pitch is freaking out. And you're going, "Man, you're just too sensitive." And I see people say that to me all the time. But it's actually the same kind of thing that was happening through 2020, 2021, that people were feeling that way. So what they did is they just accepted the instruments around them. Those are the metaphorical instruments around them. And so people who were really heavy in thinking on NESARA, thinking about the cabal, thinking about the bad things that were happening, would just kind of move back in essence inside of the matrix. And we would go, why are you going there? And there was a very, very prominent pastor, wonderful man. And I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to, badmouth him here in this way. But he was one of them and just kind of fell back into the mode. I found out later that he was kind of saying, you election deniers and all this other stuff. And it was just, he was making fun of people who had that viewpoint. Because we just need to get back into the news cycle. And they were just missing these whole level of conversation. So in essence, they became semi-normies. And as those semi-normies kind of saw 2022 come around and be very, very upset about it, but yet they would see some of the same cycle points that would happen in November of 22 that happened in November of 2020. And I can't say all those words because it'll get me banned in this way. But basically what would happen is they saw the issues and say, well, we need to come out stronger and stronger, and we need to vote more, and we do all this other stuff to be a tidal wave and push in front of them. And the reality is that's exactly, well, that's not exactly, but that is one of the ways that these idiots were totally fine about. They were fine with you actually being counterculture because you're plugging back into the matrix and go, I'm focusing on that Republican, or I'm focusing on the libertarian or the independent dude, whatever that might be. And so they became voices on either side of the aisle. Now, and when we kind of move into 2024, we're into the second quarter of 2024. The story actually starts ramping up too. Now we think about, Trump 2024. We think about him winning the states over in the Republican nomination. And we think about this kind of, this move back there. And I go, but... And I keep bringing up these kinds of things because NESARA actually deals with quantum voting. It has an ability to make sure that we identify the people who are coming in, which is the same thing that we talk about when we talk about border security. I mean, it is literally one of the most simple ways of looking at this through the QFS. And so we have this ability that when it does come online, it fixes so many of these areas that we miss, but we're not thinking that way. It's like we're just a little bit out of frequency or out of phase is another way of saying that. When you have two sine waves that just don't go in phase, what happens is it comes out discordant. And it sounds like odd, and you're like a little dog, like turning your ear kind of funny, right? Whereas when you hear, for instance, one of the most interesting things is to have a man and a woman sing a duet. And he or she, let's say, he is doing the melody and she's doing the harmony parts. It's even more interesting when it's flipped. But if one of them is doing the harmonies, hitting the thirds and the fifths and the sevenths, and you go, whoa, and it gets into your soul because those harmonies actually raise that frequency in you. And so some people get into this and get really new agey on me when they start talking about that. I'm going, there's a really fundamental thing that I very much agree with you, but they're struggling. So these semi-normies that you would think as patriots are part of the culture, but they're really not part of the counterculture. And so when they listen to people like me, they go, you're just bringing hopium. And we need to do X, Y, Z, and we need to, and so that then they get just mad at the world and they have lost all of their hope. And there was a very, very popular truther, and this woman was talking nearly this conversation the other day. And I don't want to get into it because again, I don't want to, belittle that person. But part of it is that they're they're out of sync, and so they don't want to give you hope, and they call it hopium. We see men and women are saying this all the time in the Patriot movement, especially in the Truther movement, and you go, I, I can resonate with that because at least that kind of gets to an area where everything sort of makes sense. And the answer is none of it makes sense. You should be okay that none of it makes sense because what I want you to understand something here is that Trump is not giving clear messages. He's not telling you what is, and it doesn't resonate because you're not hearing it. In 2024, he says, he talks about 2020 over and over again. And you're going, why do you keep bringing that up? It's almost like for some people that it's like an old argument that you might have with your wife or your husband. And that person just keeps bringing up, your spouse just keeps bringing up the old argument. No, lots of people think it's just women that would do this. Absolutely not. I see men doing this as well too. And they feed into the old argument because they're what they're feeling like is that argument has never been satisfied. I've never won that argument because it's so deep seated, or I've not been heard effectively, or whatever that might be, right? And so when we hear some of those things that Trump is saying, we go, why do you keep talking about that? And those are actually some of the same reasons that the court systems are doing what they're doing. And we go, well, he must be a bad guy, right? So we have whole groups of people who just must be a bad guy. And why can't he just focus on the 2024 election, right? And yet he does, but he doesn't. So it puts you in another level of discordance, out of phase, out of feel. And you're going, it's like you're living in the Matrix again. And that's why the Matrix movie is so powerful, and especially in the first one. And if you remember back in the dude that was trying to, it was going to betray Neo, and he's eating a steak. He goes, I know this isn't real, but at least I feel like it is. And I want to be someone important, like an actor. It was such a powerful statement, funny statement, but a powerful statement in there. And yet, he doesn't realize he's not going to survive in this situation because this betrayal is going to cost him everything of his life. And yet, that's the response that I'm seeing of these semi-normal people, and they can't hear the messages that are underneath. And so some people think that I or other people like me are just deeper conspiracy theorists. And I go, no, I am not in that deeper level of crazy that you want to say. I keep working upon the faith. The reason why I know this situation is going to work and I mean, I just literally got this text message from from Chad, excuse me, and Chad actually just showed something pretty dang powerful. That was I think you'd love with this too. Let me kind of read it here, but basically, and it's done by a guy that was responding to Economic Ninja. And I was reading a report from the Congressional Office of Budget Projections on the U.S. debt. They ran a million simulations, excuse me, and 88% of the simulations ended in collapse. 12% of the simulations ended in a successful exit out of this horrible economy, right? And when you have 88% of your simulations going into a loss, I promise you, if that kind of response means that you should necessarily would declare bankruptcy, right? And yet you look at that and you go, well, that's just where we're heading. And you don't realize if America fails, it's over for the rest of the world. There was almost 100% certainty that my private practice in 2009, being at 90% debt to income ratio, was going to fail because 30% is that point of bankruptcy. And I remember having a lawyer who was like, your only option is bankruptcy. And I remember over and over again that I asked the Lord, and he said, I don't want to hear bankruptcy ever again. And I've told you some of that story. But the reality, guys, is this. I had faith in the one who was talking to me, which is Jesus. And the Holy Spirit was all over me all the time. And I kept open a business that is making a difference. And if that business isn't open, I'm not in front of you today speaking about what we're speaking about. So if you like what this message is about, I'd love it if you would subscribe and like this thing and share it with your friends. But if that business isn't open and I just went to what everyone else said on the surface, then I would have closed the practice. I never would have got into this area. I promise you it would never have happened. But I listened to my faith. I didn't listen to my hopes, which are my expectations. And what you need to see is that Trump is actually telling you something because he knows something's deeper. And this thing is absolutely going to happen 100%. And even the idiots know it. The elite all know this is going to occur. And there's a certainty because they are going to fail. That's what they see in front of them. And so now they're desperate to convince everyone how this is a fail. So, what should you do? If you believe, as I believe in this way, that we are headed into an amazing time frame, not millennial reign. That's just silliness. That's anyone who says that we're walking into the millennial reign hasn't read the Bible. There's over 1,000 verses that would actually support that we have not hit the tribulation series. 1,000% for those 1,000 verses, right? But we are walking into a post-NESARA time frame where things are going to get fixed, but it's going to be as chaotic as you ever imagined because that new reality, the non-matrix, the matrix will be broken and people will have to survive without the sustenance that the matrix gave them. And I think it's fascinating for you to look that way. And when you become comfortable outside of the silliness that the world gives you, you find a peace. And that peace is what we call peace that passes understanding. And when the word says that to you, you go, peace that passes understanding will guard your heart and mind. What it does, that means here, your mind, your will, your emotions, your heart, that is the interaction between your spirit and your soul. And you're going, what? That is the connector, your heart. And so when you have that ability, it sets you that peace that no one can get unless you hold on to your faith. So I hope that helps you kind of have a different viewpoint of it, gives you a different way of thinking about it with that too. So if you like what we're talking about, please like and subscribe. Go to drscottyoung.com. You can download a snot load of stuff out there that will give you some great information. Thanks so much.